on this computer.
Okay. Oh, let me go back. Okay, let me just lower that. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Suzie Savoie, and I want to welcome you to Food Plants for Butterflies Part 2. I want to thank all the great folks at Pollinator Project Rogue Valley for hosting this presentation today. I've got hundreds of photos of butterflies and moths in this presentation. If they don't have an attribution, they are photos taken by myself or sometimes my husband Luke. Some of the photos are credited to other photographers, including local bird expert and naturalist Frank Los Peludo, who took this gorgeous photo of Mariposa copper butterflies on western false asphodel at Bigelow Lakes at the Oregon Caves National Monument and Preserve. So thank you to Frank for letting me use some of his amazing butterfly photos for this presentation as well. As mentioned, I run the local Applegate-based native seed company, Klamath Siskiyou Native Seeds. I'm really excited about today's presentation because Food Plants for Butterflies, part 1 was focused on larval host plants for butterflies, and this presentation will focus on food for adult butterflies. So I spend a lot of time out in the wild collecting native seeds, and this allows me to spend a lot of time with butterflies and moths in their natural habitat, observing them and getting to know them and the native plants they use and which ones are more preferred than others. I also take a lot of photos while I'm out and about to document butterflies and their food plants, both larval host plants and plants used by adults. And of course, collecting native seeds allows me to grow native plants that provide food for butterflies and moths, like this species shown here, mule's ears, which is about to be blooming across the region. Although today's presentation is focused on food plants for butterflies and moths, I also enjoy the educational role that I play in helping people learn to grow native plants to increase butterfly and pollinator habitat on their land, in their gardens and their landscapes. My presentation today will focus solely on native food plants for butterflies and moths, and I will specifically focus on plants native to Southwest Oregon and Northwest California, kind of the greater Klamath-Siskiyou region. There's already a lot of available information about non-native commercially grown cultivars as food plants for butterflies that are commonly available in retail nurseries. So I want to share information specific to this region since native plants are more beneficial for butterflies than cultivars and common landscaping plants. The Siskiyou Mountains are renowned for their world-class botanical biodiversity. Hold on just a second. So this is a list of the 22 designated botanical areas on the Siskiyou Crest alone, located on the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest and the Klamath National Forest. I wanted to highlight the rich botanical diversity of our region and its rare and endemic species. However, today I will focus more on common native plants, especially those that can be grown in gardens and habitat restoration projects. So today I will cover a wide range of ways that butterflies and moths eat and find nutrition, from puddling and sourcing minerals and amino acids to nectaring on flowers and sap. And some species don't eat as adults at all, so that's worth discussing as well. Adult-derived nutrition is quite different from the larval-derived nutrition that butterflies get while in the caterpillar stage of their life cycle. Adult butterflies drink nectar flower and also obtain nutrients from soil, dung, or other decaying matter. Butterflies have a long tongue called a proboscis, which they curl and uncurl to drink through like a straw. Because of their straw-like mouth parts, butterflies are mainly restricted to a liquid diet. Butterflies use their proboscis to drink sweet nectar from flowers and drink up liquids from other sources. Butterflies often hang out in muddy puddles. They use mud puddles to collect minerals and nutrients. This behavior is called mud puddling or simply puddling. You can encourage this behavior in your own backyard by creating a butterfly puddling area near some attractive flowers. When they drink from damp soil, they're drinking nutrients from decaying matter in the soil, decaying plants, manure, animals, fruit, anything else that provides salts and nutrients can be in the water that they're sucking up. So the decaying plant matter is part of puddling. Okay. 1 second here. I'm having trouble with my arrow here. Not sure what's going on. Let's try. Oh, there we go. So this is a video that I took on the road in front of my house in the fall of 2018. I had watered it down for the fall butterflies since everything was pretty dry by that time of year. Butterflies need moisture, but cannot land on water to drink. So a typical garden pond, fountain, or bird bath won't necessarily help them. Instead, butterflies sip liquid from muddy or wet soil. I think these are anglewings, California sisters, and Lorcan's admirals, and possibly some other species. So I'm going to try this. There are more photos of butterflies puddling for water and nutrients, including Lorcan's admiral, blue copper, anise swallowtail, field crescents. And here's Milbert's tortoiseshell, lilac bordered copper, anise blue, horikama, lilac bordered copper. So you can see a wide variety of butterflies just in these few slides, highlighting the fact that butterflies need to puddle in order to get the water and nutrients they need to live. So in addition to nectaring, they need to puddle. And this is a video here. This is of swallowtail butterflies puddling in my nursery pots a number of years ago. I think these are milkweed plants, and I don't know exactly what nutrients they were going after. I had fertilized with some organic fertilizer, and it might be that they were just going after some of the salts and minerals in the broken down fertilizer, perhaps. This congregation was likely all male butterflies that were preparing to mate and getting the nutrients for their sperm sacs. The sperm sacs, are transferred to the females when they mate. And so this is kind of like a butterfly bar of sorts, where they come and drink and hang out together and then go have a wild day out in the flowers with females afterwards. So there you go again. And here's some more photos of butterflies landing in my nursery pots to sip nutrition from the soil. This is a common occurrence in my little native plant nursery. I'm lucky enough to live in a place that has a large amount of butterflies and butterfly diversity, so I get to observe them a lot in my own garden and my own property. So you can see California sisters and silver-spotted skippers. Butterflies can get minerals from other sources as well, including on moist rocks, moist wood, and sap on trees. Seen here, you have California tortoiseshell, western oak dusky wing, silver-spotted skipper, Columbia skipper. They can even drink from moist straw and other various substrates. Last April, I had hundreds of this little Klamath all over the moist straw in my garden that were apparently just drinking off of the straw. It was really cool. I haven't seen this year, not on the same scale anyway, and every year is different. This species has been recorded puddling for food, and it has been observed nectaring at willow catkins. It's native to the American West down to Baja California, Mexico, and it lives in oak woodlands and forests. Gray hair streak overwinters as a chrysalis and emerges in early spring. I took this photo on March 19th of this year. This one I think had just recently emerged from its chrysalis. It wasn't very mobile yet, but it was just kind of walking around, seemingly drinking out of this moist wood and rock as it walked around just to get some minerals and moisture before taking flight. To cover the part of the presentation that gets into so-called unsavory feeding habits, or as one might say, kind of almost disgusting feeding habits, butterflies do use animal scat as a food source. This is Lorcan's admiral feeding on animal scat. I'm not a scat expert, but I think this is raccoon scat. This photo is taken near the creek where I live, and so there's raccoons around. Lorcan's admiral uses various larval host plants, wild cherries, willows, cottonwoods. And as an adult, Lorcan's admiral will use flower nectar from various species, as well as animal droppings, animal scat, as you can see here. So that's part of its diet. Here's a video of 3 different butterfly species all congregating on animal scat together to feed. California sister, Lorcan's admiral, and fritillary. Again, this is probably raccoon or fox scat. This is right next to the creek. You can hear the creek in the background. This is horikama. This was out flying at my house in March this year. They overwinter as an adult, and they can be flying on some of the warmer winter days. Uses currants and gooseberries and other species as a larval host plant. But the adult butterflies of the horikama feed on tree sap, as well as nectar from various flowers. Corycomas are very common in certain places in Southwest Oregon. So in late winter, on sunny winter days, you'll see them emerging from hiding places where they spent the dead of winter. And they're able to do this. They hide in crevices and trees and under shaggy tree bark and other places, and they rely on a natural antifreeze in their bodies to help them survive the cold. And then in late winter, early spring, they can get a jump start on the season by fighting a mate and laying eggs on new and tender growth of their host plant species before many birds are back to eat their little caterpillars. So it's kind of trying to, beat the system, beat the game a little bit, get a little bit ahead of predators. So a butterfly might land on you in order to drink the salts out of your sweat too, much like a sweat bee. These are photos of California tortoiseshell. It's abundant around me, and they sometimes land on us just to apparently drink salts out of our skin. So that's another way that butterflies can get some nutrition. California tortoiseshell also overwinters as an adult and will fly during some of the warmer winter days. It uses Ceanothus as a larval host plant, but the adult butterflies eat nectar from various flowers. And most people might not know, but a lot of butterflies eat tree sap. So that's one of the food sources from plants, is tree sap. So tree sap is a common food source for adult butterflies. They often get not only water and sugar from tree sap, but their essential minerals as well. Mourning cloaks prefer to eat sap, but later in the summer and fall, when sap is flowing less, they will eat nectar from flowers. They especially prefer to eat the sap of oak trees, which I have a picture of an oak tree there. They walk down the trunk to eat the sap and feed head downward. They will also feed on rotting fruit and only occasionally on flower nectar. Because mourning cloaks roam and migrate pretty far and wide, they are found almost anywhere that host plants occur, including woods, parks, suburbs, especially in riparian areas, because that's where a lot of their larval host plants occur, is in riparian areas. So it's a widespread species. And one interesting fact about mourning cloaks is that adults can live 10 to 11 months, which may be one of the longest lived butterflies. It's a long time for an adult butterfly to live. And then I just wanted to mention that tree sap and festering fruit and things like that, they're eaten by lots of other butterflies as well. And I'll mention some of that going forward, like anglewings, tortoiseshells, wood nymphs, etc. After this slide, I will transition into talking about plants and nectar. But before I do, I want to highlight one easy source for getting information about butterflies and moths. And that's the Butterflies and Moths of North America website. There's the URL there. It's a fantastic source of information with range maps, identification information about larval host plants and adult food sources, etc. This slide features California sister. This species has 2 or 3 broods with main flights overlapping from late March into October. And adults sometimes last into the winter months and overwinter, which I see them overwinter at my place. This species can come out of hibernation as an adult on warm winter days as well. It uses oak species as larval host plants, and I have got a lot of canyon live oak, which it likes to use as a larval host plant, so it's pretty common. As an adult, it will come to mud, water, and rotting fruit, and occasionally it comes to flowers in the fall months, according to the website Butterflies and Moths in North America I read. But I've never seen it go to flowers. I pretty much exclusively just see it using sap at my house. So perhaps maybe at times of the year when there's less sap flowing, they're more likely to use some flowers, but I don't really see that myself. I've never really seen California sisters use flowers on my property or in the wild, even in general. Even though the other ways seem less directly associated with plants, as I mentioned, even when butterflies are puddling, they're receiving nutrition from decayed plant matter or digested plant matter in the form of animal scat or from tree sap directly. So even other, so it's still kind of a connection to plants, even when they're just puddling. But most of us associate butterfly food with nectar. So now that I've covered various ways butterflies and moths can get nutrition from sources other than nectar, I'll move on to discussing nectar. In addition to sugar, Flower nectars contain 2 macronutrients, amino acids and fatty acids. The liquids butterflies choose are usually packed with sugar for energy and with minerals and vitamins. Plant type and color is important. Adult butterflies are attracted to red, yellow, orange, pink, and purple blossoms that are flat-topped or clustered and have short flower tubes. It's really good to plant your best nectar sources in the sun. The best use for nectar plants in your yard and your garden or in the landscape is in the sun. They're more likely to come nectar at flowers in full sun. Sometimes you'll see them in part shade as well, but they definitely prefer full sun. I'm going to just briefly touch on annual species. They're a really large and important component of native plant communities. There's diamond clarkia, grand colomia, sea blush, bluehead gilia, bicolor lupin. Annuals, of course, germinate from seed, grow and flower, and get seed in one season of growth and start the cycle all over again the next year. Many annuals are attractive to butterflies, including bluehead gilia. These are hair streaks on bluehead gilia, or sometimes people just call it blue gilia. This species grows from low elevation to high elevation, so you'll see it in a wide range of sunny habitats. Vinegar weed is a late blooming native annual found mainly at lower elevations and in valleys. Vinegar weed smells just like vinegar and has a really unique flower shape that is highly attractive to butterflies. I most often see skippers on the flowers when they are in bloom in late summer to early fall. And let's see if I'm going to be able to, let's see. There we go. Okay, this is a video of skipper butterfly nectaring on vinegar weed in August. Since this species is blooming when most other species are done flowering and have gone dormant, many insects, including butterflies, find this species attractive. This is a typical scene at vinegar weed populations in August, where you often find skippers all over the flowers. So now that I've briefly touched on some annuals that butterflies use for nectar, we're going to move on to perennials. And I include biennials and short-lived perennials in this as well. A lot of perennials can live for a very, very long time, providing years, if not decades, of flower nectar and floral resources for butterflies. However, some are short-lived, and others that are biennials may only live for a couple years and then flower, go to seed, and die out and reproduce again from seed. In the remainder of the presentation, I'm going to focus on butterflies first, and I'll talk about moths later in the presentation. As I go through many of the great perennials that are good nectar plants for butterflies and moths, I'm going to loosely organize the species by plant family as they are classified by the Oregon Flora Project. This is just to help me organize the presentation and as a point of interest to people who are already familiar with some of these species. Even though it will be written on some of the slides when I change to a different plant family, and I might mention some of the plant families, it's just additional information to show the relationship of plants and not a big focus of the presentation. So camas is a flowering bulb that grows in moist areas that dry out in late summer. The bulbs have long been an important food source for native tribes that have and still do manage fields of camas for food production. Camas is mainly found at low to mid elevations. This slide features both large camas and common camas, but we have other native species of camas in Oregon as well. Camas is great for early season butterflies that need nectar early in the spring, including endangered species like the tailored checker spot butterfly that's seen here, which is endemic to the Pacific Northwest. It grows north of us more in the Willamette Valley. Checker spots and other butterflies also like to nectar on other bulb producing plants such as wild hyacinth. I actually just saw this species when I went to, the wild hyacinth was blooming on Table Rocks today when I went up there. So if you haven't ever seen wild hyacinth, the Tridalea hyacinthina, if you want to go see it right now, it's in bloom on Table Rocks. So that's an easy place. You can see it right in the very beginning of the trail. It doesn't take long to even go see it. So this species of wild hyacinth is also an edible bulb, and it would have been probably would have been visible in great numbers and vast swaths historically before settlement here. It's very common in areas where clay soils that are moist in spring that dry out in the summer. There's a lot of it in the Applegate and areas that have clay soils as well. It's a lot pretty common in the Illinois Valley, around Grants Pass, also. So very widespread species, just its habitat has definitely dwindled since settlement here. So these are photos of checker spots on wild hyacinth. These photos were actually taken at the Troon Vineyard Native Plant and Pollinator Botanical Garden in the Applegate. This plant family also includes our gorgeous blue dicks and ukao, which grow from bulbs and attract a wide variety of butterflies. Blue dicks usually blooms earlier in the late spring, and then ukao is more blooming now, usually in early summer. And sometimes they can grow in the same place, and there'll be a flush of blue dicks, and then later it'll be ukao. They look very similar. You have to really kind of look at the flowers to tell them apart. All of the flowers I just featured in the asparagus plant family, including camas, wild hyacinth, ukao, and blue dicks, can be grown from seed or bulbs in the garden setting. I had camas plants at the Pollinator Project Rogue Valley plant sale. I'll have them again next spring. It's a great plant to grow. So we're moving on to the carrot family. This is sharp-tooth angelica, which is found in various habitat types, but it prefers moist areas with good drainage. It's most often found in kind of rocky habitat, mountain meadows at higher elevations, maybe in the serpentines in the Illinois Valley, you see it at lower elevations. This photo features a Rocky Mountain Parnassian nectaring on the flowers of sharp-tooth angelica. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous butterfly. Also in the carrot plant family are lomatiums. We have an incredible diversity of lomatiums in the region that grow in a wide variety of habitats. You can see fern-leaf biscuit root, nine-leaf biscuit root, California lomatium, big seed biscuit root, pestle lomatium. I'm a huge proponent of lomatiums. They're not the showiest plants in the garden setting, but man, they bring in the pollinators of all kinds, and they're larval host plants. So you do see butterflies nectaring on the flowers as well. I'd say they're more important for butterflies as a larval host plant, but they do nectar on the flowers too. So this is a checker spot on big seed biscuit root. Showy milkweed, of course, is a larval host plant for the monarch butterfly, as are all plants in the genus Asclepius, as probably most of you on this Zoom are familiar with. So showy milkweed can be found in meadows and riverbanks and other areas where there's at least some seasonal moisture available in the spring. Great garden plant for monarchs and every other butterfly too. Butterflies just love milkweed. So this is narrowleaf milkweed, blooms after showy milkweed and has narrower leaves. It can take drier soil moisture than showy milkweed, and it too makes a great garden plant, and its flowers attract lots of butterflies. So you can see in the upper right-hand photo there, there's a blue butterfly with a silver spotted skipper nectaring together. I took that photo on Lone Pine Creek, which is the creek that you probably have never known, that's right next to the Medford Airport. It's had a habitat restoration project there that the Freshwater Trust has done, that's brought back beavers and herons and lots of other wildlife, as well as great milkweed stands. And so right next to the Medford Airport, you can find good milkweed habitat with butterflies. So spreading dogbane is not easily grown from seed or transplanted, but when successful, it's an amazing native plant for butterflies. Tom Landis and I have talked about how great it would be to get this one more in production for people, but it's just kind of difficult to grow, finicky in pots. I have a lot of it on my property, and I've dug up a lot of it for Tom over the years, and he finally has gotten it to transplant okay at a few sites. It does spread by rhizome, but it's just a knockout butterfly plant. Butterflies love spreading dogbane. The aster plant family is the largest plant family in North America. They're good nectar plants because they have all the clusters of small flowers, which lets the butterflies conserve energy by sampling many flowers in one small area. The aster family, the Asteraceae, fills that bill nicely, since each composite flower is really a group of many smaller flowers. So for instance, in looking at this fleabane right here, there are not only many disc flowers in this yellow center, those are a bunch of disc flowers. There's also ray flowers. So both the petals, which are ray flowers, and the disc flowers are all flowers. So there's, many, many flowers all in one inflorescence on that plant. So it provides a ton of nectar in one spot. So it's good, efficient nectaring for butterflies. it's a lot of nectar bang for the buck, so to speak. Pearly everlasting is a larval host plant for many butterflies, but they also really enjoy the nectar of the flowers as well. Pearly everlasting likes moisture, but is otherwise pretty easy to grow in garden conditions. This photo is awesome. This woman, Jean Myers, let me use this photo from Cal Photos. Gorgeous shot of a monarch on Pearly everlasting. Western Joe Pye weed, or Agritina occidentalis, is also in the aster family. This is a lovely flower that's most often seen at higher elevations, but it's around at low elevations as well. You see it along the Applegate River. I've seen it along the Rogue River. It's on some smaller streams as well at low elevations, but it's pretty common up on the Siskiyou Crest in the Red Buttes Wilderness, the Siskiyou Wilderness. Over the years, I've been trying to get this plant more in production, providing seed and potted plants for people, because it's a really attractive landscaping plant, and it just is really highly attractive as well. And once it's established, it's actually pretty easy to grow. So it's not a very common plant that you'll see often when you're out in wildlands or hiking around. Like, you kind of have to know where the populations are, but it's not uncommon. So maybe someday you can also include some Western Joe Pye weed in your garden. I'll hopefully have it for sale in fall. I've got a lot of baby seedlings right now. One of the most common sunflower type native plants is deltoid balsam root. This is a low growing perennial sunflower that's super tough, drought tolerant, highly attracted to pollinators, deer resistant. I mean, you can't go wrong with that combination. This is a checker spot butterfly here. Balsam roots are slow growing, and that's the only reason why they're not a popular landscaping plant, because they're just slow. But once they're established, they're very tough, and you don't have to give them any water. They're just really, really easygoing once they're established. They're just slow. You have to have a lot of patience for this species. It's like growing an orchard. You have to just have patience for it to get established, and then you'll be rewarded every year after that. So they're great for landscaping or restoration, and it's just great that they don't get eaten by deer. So if you live in a spot with lots of deer, balsam roots are good for you. Many people don't realize we have native thistles, and because of this, many native thistle species are threatened by well-meaning people pulling and eradicating native thistles, thinking that they're pulling invasive species, which we do have some pretty bad invasive thistles that need to be managed. But this one, if you see a bright red thistle, it's native, so don't pull it. This gorgeous native thistle, it's called Western or cobwebby thistle. It's bright red, can't be mistaken. It's super attractive to butterflies and hummingbirds alike. You'll either see the butterflies fighting over it or the hummingbirds, one of the two. This is Oregon sunshine, which is also called woolly sunflower in California. They don't call it Oregon sunshine much. They call it Oregon sunshine, or they call it woolly sunflower. It's a widespread species that grows in sunny, dry habitats from valley bottom to high elevation. There are numerous native varieties that can take on different forms in different locations. I seeded this meadow here on private property on Mount Ashland Ski Road with Oregon sunshine included in the seed mix, and this was the result 2 years after seeding. Christina mentioned the workshops that we're going to be giving. I'm going to be giving 2 workshops, one in July and one in September, at this property on Mount Ashland Ski Road. And the workshop in July is just going to be going there and talking about how we established the native meadows, the maintenance, just the timeline of how it was established, and this covering the different species that are there, seeing it in full bloom. And then in September, we're going to do a seed collection workshop there. After the plants have gone to seed, we're going to do a workshop teaching people how to collect seed and do some demonstrations on cleaning seed and things like that. So that's part, this property will be part of the workshops that Pollinator Project Rogue Valley is going to host, and I'll be teaching up there on Mount Ashland Ski Road. This is waxy coneflower. It has the showy yellow ray petals here. This is the cone flower. So these are a type of cone flower. You can see the cone. Cone flowers just mean, that they have this cone that's kind of an elongated center that's filled with lots and lots of little flowers. You can see kind of this row right here is where the flowers are actually blooming in the cone, and they just kind of open up sequentially. So when you see butterflies feeding on the cones, they're usually going around the center and going after all these tiny little flowers in the center. This species is often found growing in swampy, wet areas or in fens or with Darlingtonia, the cobra lily wetlands, the carnivorous plant, mostly more often on, probably almost exclusively on serpentine soil in the wild. But they take really easily and readily to garden conditions. They don't require growing in serpentine soil. The top two photos are taken in the wild, and the two bottom photos are taken in my garden, where I get many butterflies visiting my waxy coneflowers. There's a related species in California that's just called California coneflower. They're pretty similar. The waxy coneflower just has kind of more waxy leaves and some other different characteristics. And here's another photo of American lady using waxy coneflower in my garden. It's such a beautiful butterfly. Western coneflower is related. It's probably the most common Rudbeckia in Western Oregon. It doesn't have the showy yellow ray flowers like the waxy coneflower has, but the pollinators don't mind. They still have hundreds of little flowers all in that cone to go after, so there's still plenty of nectar. So since the cone itself is a composite, that means it's just a composite of lots of tiny little flowers, and there's plenty of nectar for these happy butterflies. Bigelow sneezeweed also has a cone center. This is Bigelow sneezeweed or Helen's flower. If you spend any time in the Siskiyou Mountains or up in the high country, you've likely come across this species. It's pretty common in meadows throughout the range. The name comes from the fact that some Native American tribes were documented to have used this species as a snuff, not because it's allergenic. It's not allergenic particularly. Butterflies commonly nectar on Bigelow sneezeweed, and it's easygoing, easy to grow in gardens. Here's Oregon whitetop aster. It's a super late blooming species. It blooms into late summer to early fall. It grows from low elevation habitat, like in Cathedral Hills, outside Grants Pass, up into high elevations. But it's more abundant at mid to high elevations. And since it blooms late, it's highly sought after by butterflies for its nectar, because a lot of the other plants are usually done flowering by then, including skippers, which are a butterfly that you see kind of later in the late summer and early fall. There's numerous species of native goldenrod that grow in our region, and they're all very attractive to butterflies. Some goldenrod species are more drought tolerant than others. Some need a little bit more moisture, so there's kind of various types that can be adapted to different conditions in your garden. Leafy bract aster is one of the common asters in montane meadows in the Siskiyous. It's a late blooming species. Starts blooming at low elevations, maybe sometimes in midsummer. In the high elevations in its natural habitat, it's more late summer. It's highly attractive to pollinators. This photo was taken in my garden. So this single plant has 3 different kinds of butterflies using it at one time. You got the buckeyes, you got skippers. It's just like packed with butterflies. Douglas aster also blooms late and will attract late season butterflies like buckeyes. These photos were taken at the Troon Vineyard Native Plant Garden last September. And the last plant in the aster family I'll feature is mule's ears, which are very similar to balsam root and are also low-growing native sunflower. But mule's ears have slightly different plant structures. They have different leaf shape, different filaries, etc., than balsam root. And they bloom at different times too. So in the wild right now, balsam root, at least at low to mid elevations, is primarily done flowering already. And now it's time for the mule's ears to start flowering. They look pretty similar. But they both attract butterflies and lots of other pollinators. Can be found at low to high elevations. So here's a swallowtail nectaring on mule's ears. Here's a video of a checker spot nectaring on mule's ears, just swaying in the breeze along with the flower, just going with the flow, literally. So we're going to switch gears out of the aster family now. So we're in the Brassicaceae mustard family. Western wallflower is in the mustard family. It produces seed pods that burst open and the seeds pop out, similar to brassicas you might grow in your garden, like kale or spicy mustard greens, things like that. Wallflower, however, it thrives in rocky, dry sites and is attractive to butterflies, such as this checker spot that you see here. more often than not, if I see wallflower in the wild, I usually see some butterflies on it. Butterflies don't generally eat nectar from plants in the pea family like lupins, based mainly on the fact that the flower structure is not compatible with a butterfly's proboscis. But occasionally you'll see a butterfly on a pea family plant flowers. I actually see butterflies checking out lupin flowers all the time, but I think they're just checking them out. They don't usually actually get anything out of them because they just can't get their proboscis into the flower. But this monarch here is likely nectaring on this broadleaved lotus. So there are some plants in the pea family, the Fabaceae family, that they can actually use. So this is the broadleaf lotus flower. These are the seed pods. This species usually grows in rocky habitat, kind of drier sites in the mountains. Many plants, don't produce nectar at all also. So that's something to think about. Butterflies can't necessarily use every flower shape like lupins and other flower shapes. And then some plants don't even produce nectar. So you could think of something like California poppy, which only produces pollen. So butterflies aren't going to use California poppies. That doesn't mean poppies aren't great for bees and other species that love pollen, that are pollen eaters. And then other plants are wind or water pollinated, and they don't rely on insect pollination at all. So they don't produce the nectar reward for pollination services. So plants that have nectar are attracting insects like butterflies to their flowers to aid pollination. Coyote mint is a clump-forming perennial in the mint family that has a minty scent, and it's very drought tolerant and grows from low to high elevations. As you'll see from the slides I share, this species is a powerhouse of nectar for butterflies. I was able to come up with, when I was looking for photos for this presentation, I was able to come up with a lot of my own photos of butterflies on coyote mint and those of other people too, because you just see butterflies on coyote mint so much. So you end up with a lot of photos of butterflies on coyote mint. So here is some American ladies and Hydaspes fritillaries on coyote mint. Here's monarchs and painted ladies on coyote mint. You get the point. The species is very attractive. It should definitely be part of everyone's drought tolerant butterfly garden. Once established, coyote mint is very easy to grow. Here's a video. This is a video of fritillary butterfly nectaring on coyote mint in the native plant garden on Mount Ashland Ski Road, where I'll do the workshop. So you can see it working the different flowers as it moves around the coyote mint inflorescence. And of course, it has to share these nectar-rich flowers with other pollinators as well. They're all just enjoying it together. Like coyote mint, horse mint is loved by a wide variety of pollinators. Horse mint also has a minty smell, but it doesn't spread by rhizome like non-native peppermint or spearmint. It's a clump-forming native perennial most often found in medium to moist meadows at mid to high elevations. It's a great plant for butterfly gardens. Here's some videos. This is a swallowtail butterfly nectaring on horse mint, also on the Mount Ashland Ski Road property. You can see that it sends its proboscis into the different little flowers in the horse mint inflorescence as it moves around the flower. And it will work the different flowers as it moves through the horse mint patch, just kind of focusing on each flower and then moving from flower to flower. And here is a video of fritillary butterfly nectaring on horse mint at the same location. So you can get a sense of how much butterflies like horse mint. It's definitely a preferred nectar plant in the high country in the summer. But horse mint can be grown at low elevations as well. It's very easy to grow in garden settings. It'll just need a little bit of supplemental water. Plants in the lily family, like cat's ears, are visited by butterflies, like this Edith's copper butterfly seen here in this photo. I wouldn't say that I see a lot of butterflies on these, but they do sometimes use them. Leopard lilies, on the other hand, and tiger lilies are butterfly magnets, and they're often visited by swallowtails. I see swallowtails on these a lot in the wild. These species love wet, boggy places. This Wiggins lily here is an endemic to our area. These can be grown in gardens around ponds or other moist locations or just wet soil spots. They're actually fairly easy to grow, and they're just super slow growing. kind of like growing a balsam root or a mule's ears, just very slow. But once they're there and they have the right conditions, they do great in the garden. Wild blue flax is a dryland perennial wildflower that grows from valley bottom in some locations to high elevations. It's a common plant on the Siskiyou crest. It's attractive to many different butterfly species, including the fritillary that you see here on it. Pussy paws, or Calyptridium umbulatum, is a small prostrate flower that's widespread across the region in higher elevation places. You'll see vast areas of pussy paws in some locations in high elevation mountain meadows. This species is highly attractive. You can see this Parnassian butterfly here. I took this photo of this Parnassian on pussy paws near Bolin Peak last year above Takilma. After the Slater fire up there above Takilma, the pussy paws just went crazy. They had a massive, massive bloom along with other wildflowers in that area. And the butterflies just there's a big population of butterflies because of it. If you've got a moist location in your garden or on your land, fireweed is a great plant for moist soil. It's super pretty. It's surely to attract butterflies, and it's a very strong nectar producing plant. But it will spread if it has space. So if you're happy to have it spread, that's great. Spreads kind of like milkweed or yarrow or mugwort, so you have to make sure you have enough space for it. But butterflies sure love fireweed. It's just a really beautiful flower. Scarlet gilia is in the phlox family, and like other phlox species that I don't really necessarily have photos for in this presentation, it's attractive to butterflies, especially because of its firecracker red color. Scarlet gilia is common at high elevations in some locations around the region. Again, this is the property up on Mount Ashland Ski Road. I seeded this meadow. I had scarlet gilia in the seed mix, and it's doing really, really good in the landscaped environment and is attracting butterflies there as well as hummingbirds. And this photo I just took today of my mom's house here in Medford. So there's scarlet gilia just really popping in a small suburban yard, just does really great in the landscape in drought tolerant gardens. And of course, I can't do a presentation about butterflies without talking about wild buckwheats. They make up a big component of our native flora from low to high elevations and are powerhouses for butterflies. And some of the most important species because they're used as larval host plants as well as for adult flower nectar. This is a blue copper on buckwheat. This slide features some of the different native buckwheat species we have. There's a lot of them, but here's some sulfur flower, airleaf buckwheat, tall woolly buckwheat, bare stem buckwheat, lots of different kinds. Blues and checker spots are common visitors on wild buckwheat flowers, but you'll see many, many other kinds of butterflies using native buckwheats as well. So if you don't have buckwheats in your garden, I highly recommend it. Deer do sometimes like to nibble at them, especially the flowers, unfortunately, but I've got some blooming in my yard right now. I've got lots of deer, so it just kind of sometimes depends. Gray buckeyes are generalist feeders. That often feed on flowers in the buckwheat family. Here there is a photo of a buckeye on native white margin knotweed, which is this little flower here, which is a native little flower, and bare stem buckwheat here. Not the showiest flowers, which kind of shows that even really small kind of diminutive flowers can be important for butterflies. It doesn't necessarily have to be a big showy flower. It can be something small and kind of diminutive. It still provides nutrition for butterflies. Mountain larkspur is also called tower larkspur or giant larkspur. This is our super showy, really large larkspur that grows in wet, high elevation mountain meadows. If you want to see a hummingbird display in summer and butterflies, just find a patch of mountain larkspur and you'll surely find them fighting over the nectar. The butterflies, of course, don't fight in the same way as the hummingbirds do. They really like defend their floral resources. But you definitely see butterflies. This is a swallowtail nectarine on mountain larkspur up at Mount Ashland in the summer. I got that photo when there was lots of butterflies working the larkspur. Large leaf avens is in the rose plant family. Although these flowers don't look like a rose, like many people would think, They are related and the flower structures are similar. These photos at the top feature a Clodius parnassian butterfly on large leaf avens. This species grows in moist places, mainly at higher elevations in our region here. And a note about plants in the rose family, that's just kind of a good time to talk about this. Like other pollinators, butterflies can't access the nectar of double-flowered or highly bred roses that can be popular in nurseries because they look, they look really great to humans. They're really interesting, all these double flowers that they've been created by nurseries. But the double flowers make it pretty impossible for butterflies to get to the nectar resources. So if you do buy plants in the rose family or even just plants in general, make sure to get simple flowers, the old varieties, or just, something that's not highly bred and really complicated flower structure, something that pollinators can actually get to the nectar resources, because otherwise you're growing a plant that's doesn't really have any value for pollinators. The last plant in the rose family I'll highlight is Josephine Horkelia, or Horkelia congesta, subspecies nemorosa. I've been growing this species at the Troon Vineyard Native Plant and Pollinator Botanical Gardens that I created at Troon Vineyard, and it's proven to be super attractive to lots of different kinds of pollinators, including butterflies, as seen here in these photos with checker spots. These two lower photos are actually photos taken on BLM land near Troon, where I collected the seeds, and the top photo is the patch that I grew from direct seeding at Troon. It's not the showiest plant, but it's a knockout plant for pollinators. And a presentation about food plants for adult butterflies wouldn't be complete without talking about shrubs. By volume, flowering trees and shrubs produce a massive amount of flowers that provide important food and resources for pollinators, birds, and other wildlife. And I want to highlight Ceanothus and a few other flowering shrubs today to at least acknowledge shrubs as an important part of the diets of butterflies. When in full flower, a hillside of buckbrush can provide a lot of nectar for butterflies, as you can see in this photo of buckbrush in the Applegate. It's just a whole mountain of flowers there. There's a lot of other flowering shrubs that are great for butterflies, like spirea, elderberry, mock orange. However, in the interest of time, I'll just touch on a few more, including chokecherry, and then this is yerba santa. Yerba santa is an amazing, really tough, drought-tolerant, and fire-adapted plant that grows in chaparral communities in Southwest Oregon. It has tubular flowers that are attractive to butterflies. You can see this swallowtail and a checker spot. So yerba santa is great for drought-tolerant gardens. It's super tough once it's established, won't need any water, and it has really showy flowers. It's also a medicinal plant. It's great for lots of reasons. And here's an anglewing on incense cedar and a brown elfin on juniper foliage. I just kind of wanted to touch on the use of, let me go back. Whoops, I can't do that. Let me go back one real quick. Okay, I was going to say many species of butterflies and moths will use conifers as larval host plants, and they also feed on conifers too, on the sap or on the moisture on the leaves and needles. Here are pine elfins and silver-spotted skippers on incense cedar foliage. Butterflies also need trees to hide in and roost in at night or in inclement weather. So conifers are good for that as well. So then here are the anglewings and brown elfin on juniper. So I'm just showing, that the butterflies also use conifer species. They're also an important plant for numerous butterflies. So moving on to vines, we don't have very many vining species in our region, but they are worth noting as they can produce some showy and amazing flowers for butterflies. So here is the native pink honeysuckle, or also referred to as hairy honeysuckle. It can either grow along the forest floor as a ground cover, or it will vine up shrubs and trees. I just wanted to point out that clear wing moths use native honeysuckles as larval host plants, which is a good thing to think about. These are gorgeous large moths that mimic the appearance of bumblebees and have clear wings. I'll mention them in a little bit. And then this is an anise swallowtail butterfly nectaring on the flowers. So this is in my garden. I grow this species, it grows wild on my property, but I grow it like a landscaping plant up on the garden fences, and it just produces a great amount of flowers when you actually grow it up something and it gets a little sun, and then you'll definitely see the butterflies. So these are more photos of pink honeysuckle being visited by various butterflies and moths in my garden, including silver-spotted skipper, Anna's swallowtail, clear-winged moths, and other native the other native honeysuckles we have in the region. We have chaparral honeysuckle and orange honeysuckle. They're also great for butterflies. This is chaparral honeysuckle. It has a yellow flower, and this you will see in chaparral. It grows in, in the hillsides that have a bunch of like buckbrush and manzanita and, just really harsh sun-baked slopes of chaparral. You will find the chaparral honeysuckle, and it kind of grows like a shrub, but it can kind of vine around like a vine as well. And this is orange honeysuckle, which is easy to grow on, fences and trellises, but it does like a little bit more moisture for sure than the other two, and it can tolerate part shade as well. Western clematis is a climbing, spreading vine with showy flowers that's generally found in riparian areas in our region at low to mid elevations. You'll often find butterflies nectaring on the flowers of Western clematis. Sometimes you'll see it kind of growing along roadsides and ditches and things like that too, growing on fence lines. Okay, I'm going to touch on some moths now, which will be the last topic of the presentation, kind of starting back at the beginning with annuals. So this is a day-flying moth. I haven't been able to ID this one yet, but this is using sea blush, which is an annual wildflower, Plectridis congesta. This wildflower just pretty much got done flowering. It's a really early blooming annual wildflower that you'll see lots of pollinators on. So this is a day flying moth using it in the spring. And here are a couple of adorable ocean spray fairy moths using tarweed. Tarweed, of course, Mattia elegans and other tarweeds. We have annuals and perennial tarweeds, but this Mattia elegans is an annual. And these little ocean spray moths use ocean spray as a larval host plant. So I featured the photo there. But they're just a super cute little moth that you see quite a bit in the summer. And they clearly like to also use annuals. Here's the fairy moth nectaring on buckbrush flowers up in the top right corner. And that's just kind of a close-up of the little moth. I just love, they're just so cute. Those long antennae are just so adorable. Another moth that I've seen on numerous types of flowers, including tarweed, is the small Heliothodes moth, which is also a day-flying moth. I took these photos on tarweed in Troon Vineyard last summer. And this is a common moth. I've got some more photos of it on Oregon Sunshine. It's worth noting that, since most moths are nocturnal, it can be hard to capture them on camera because most of us aren't out taking photos after dark. You definitely have to probably have a pretty good camera to be able to capture them well that way. So most of my photos are of either day flying moths or moths that are at least out in the evening and morning hours. And here is the same moth, the small Heliothodes moth on wild hyacinth in the Troon Native Plant Garden. Again, the wild hyacinth is blooming at Table Rock right now. And I'm sure these moths are on the flowers there as well, because just today I saw them nectaring on the carrot leaf horchilea there. So I mentioned the Josephine horchilea as a great pollinator plant that I've been growing at the Troon Native Plant Gardens. And this horchilea, the carrot leaf horchilea, is common in the Rogue Valley, especially in really dry areas, pine oak woodlands, grasslands, chaparral communities. So I just took this photo today of this little moth nectaring on the carrot leaf horchilea docifolia. So you'll see this moth on horchilias as well. Pacific houndstong is an early blooming plant that is most often found in oak woodlands, chaparral, and mixed conifer forests at low to mid elevations. Houndstong is a larval host plant for this moth here. This is the houndstong woolly bear moth. But the adult moths, when they're an adult, also will use the houndstong flowers. So after, the moths that are adults that are out in the early spring, you'll see them flying around when the houndstong's in flower. They'll be nectaring on the flowers as well as other flowers. of different species as well in early spring. There's not a ton blooming at that time, so they kind of have to use the houndstong because they're out so early. And then usually once the flowers are done, that's when they've laid their eggs and the larvae are growing. And then the brood that comes out, you'll see them using flowers later in the summer. So you can see this houndstong woolly bear moth on the left using showy milkweed there later in the summer. I grow a lot of this, a lot of houndstong on my property, just kind of wild. I just seed it in a lot of different places so that I can have a reliable source of seed for sale. But because I grow so much of it, the caterpillars definitely eat up my plants a lot. So sometimes they even eat the seed and sometimes diminish my seed availability because once there's a big patch of houndstong around, this moth will show up for sure. And they're a really beautiful moth. They're also sometimes called the wild forget-me-not moth, just because houndstong is in the forget-me-not family, borage family. So they just kind of look like that. So you can hear them referred to as both. Our native Sidalcia or checker mallows can put on quite a showy display, attracting a wide variety of pollinators and as larval host plants. This is an Oregon checker mallow, which grows mostly at higher elevations and in moist meadows. And this is a Rocky Mountain Parnassian, I don't know why I said Parnassian. This is a Rocky Mountain clearwing moth using checker mallow in my garden. Clearwing moths also nectar on showy milkweed. These moths mimic bumblebees, as I mentioned before, to ward off potential predators. I was hoping to play this for you. This is a video of a clearwing moth nectaring on pink honeysuckle. I just love these moths. They're just really cool. They mimic the bumblebee and fly around like a hummingbird. It's moths like these that you see out during the day that show how important moths are as pollinators. But most people just think of moths as drab, insignificant insects. But moths are super important pollinators, and many are very beautiful and charismatic, like the clearwings. The adults of the buckwheat borer moth, a type of clearwing moth, are highly variable in color. This one was taken by Franklos Pluto, I think, up on the Siskiyou crest on buckwheat. This moth, it's associated with higher elevation buckwheat habitat. It's known to use different kinds of buckwheat, as well as other plants in the buckwheat family as larval host plants. But as you see here in this photo, it also nectars on the buckwheat flowers as well. I think that the name borer is referring to the fact that it uses the root systems of buckwheat as part of its larval stage. This is white-lined sphinx moth nectaring on coyote mint flowers. We talked about butterfly use of the coyote mint, but moths also use the flowers as well. Sphinx moths are so much fun to watch. They're also sometimes referred to as hummingbird moths because they move around and kind of flutter like a hummingbird. They also seem kind of hyper like a hummingbird too, like they need a lot of sugary nectar from flowers to keep themselves going. Here's a white-lined sphinx moth nectaring on great camas in my garden at dusk. I don't see this happen every year. It seems like some years the camas doesn't bloom at the same time that the sphinx moths are out. So plant phenology changes year to year, and you'll see different flower visitors year to year because of that. So that's something to keep in mind, year to year. What makes a great butterfly and moth nectar plant one year for food is different than the next year if the weather patterns are just really different. And of course, climate change has an impact on that as well. The deceptive sallow moth caterpillars feed on the foliage of mainly Douglas fir trees as larvae. But I wasn't able to find any information about what they eat as an adult, if any. This species lives on my property in the Douglas fir forest. I think it's a super beautiful moth. And I wanted to include this slide about it because for some species that you encounter, there may just not be very much information about what they eat, if they eat at all. So it just kind of shows that there's much more research into the food needs of butterflies and moths is needed, especially in more remote areas of Southwest Oregon where there's very little research happening. We have a lot of wildlands with still a lot to discover. Butterflies and moths face many perils while they forage for food, no matter how they eat. Seen here are Sarah orange-tip butterflies while feeding and resting. And then you can see there's a crab spider there that's coming in. It was waiting for something to come along, and it captured the butterfly. And here's another photo of another butterfly meeting its demise while coming to nectar on western false asphodel. It's just part of the cycle of life. Many predators wait for butterflies to land on them and eat them as food. And what's interesting is the western false asphodel has been recently discovered to be carnivorous. And so it's kind of interesting to think of the fact that, this plant is beneficial to adult butterflies as a nectar plant, but it also can the tiny little gnats and things will get stuck to the sticky stem, and it can actually digest them. So it can the plant not only can eat insects, but it can also provide food for insects. So, and then also, you see this spider grabbing and killing the butterfly for food as well. So it's all kind of like these little packages of microcosm of lots of life going on one flower. And many species don't eat as an adult at all. This is the giant Ceanothus silk moth. Ceanothus silk moths have one brood, and depending on altitude and seasonal variation, it kind of depends on when that is out. I actually just had one at my window the other evening, and it made my cat go wild at the window. And I hate it when that happens, because they're just these big, beautiful, huge moths, and they'll just hit themselves against the window for the light. And so I just try to turn off all the lights in my house and get them to kind of move on to more natural behavior. So they're out right now. Although the Ceanothus silk moth caterpillars use a wide range of plants, they do use Ceanothus, but they use other species as well. But the adults don't feed. So imagine how much energy goes into creating a huge moth like this, and they don't even eat as an adult. So it's short-lived as an adult, and it spends most of its life cycle as an egg or a caterpillar. And it's gorgeous, though. It's not uncommon to find, and it's also used as a food plant for birds and other species. That top right photo is a dead one, actually, that had probably been eaten by a bird. That's a pretty big, juicy snack for a bird. So you can see the size of them compared to, I think that's my husband Luke's hands there holding that one. So 2 years are needed to complete the development and life cycle of the western sheep moth. This is the western sheep moth here. The cocoons overwinter, and in the spring, the adults emerge and start the cycle again. It uses various species as a larval host plant, but like the Ceanothus silk moth, adults do not feed. It too is very brightly colored and is a very large moth that's super beautiful, and it's always a total pleasure to see these moths. Super showy, charismatic moth. But it just goes to show how much energy these particular moths need to consume as a larva, to be able to put on, to be able to not only, go through the metamorphosis to change into this adult, showy, big, beautiful moth. That just takes an incredible amount of energy. Adults of the California tiger moth are diurnal and are usually found in spring, occurring later in the summer at higher altitude. And they also don't visit flowers. So there's quite a few species that either don't eat as an adult, or they don't visit flowers. So let me see if I can get this to play. I just wanted to show, this is a video, that just kind of shows that this is the part of my garden nursery, just because to show that if you grow a lot of native species, you can get tons of butterflies in your garden. So it just kind of shows, that if you plant natives, if you provide not only flower nectar for the adults and larval host plants, you're going to bring in lots and lots of butterflies. So just giving you encouragement to grow natives for butterfly plant food. And here's some great resources. Oregon Flora is great information for the flora of Oregon. Cal Flora is great information for the flora of California, but we are included in our region is part of the California Floristic Province. And so our region is included in Cal Flora as well. and then the Native Plant Society of Oregon. Calscape is also a great resource. You can learn more about which plants are best to use, as well as what species support butterflies and moths as larval host plants. Oregon Flora also has some good resources for landscaping as well. As you know, California groups are just better funded, and so there's a little bit more information available on Calscape. But I know Oregon Flora is trying to raise money to increase the information available on the Oregon Flora websites as well. I'll also suggest that for further information about butterflies and moths, like I mentioned before, check out the Butterflies and Moths of North America website. And I'm sure there's other great sites that you can use as well, but that's kind of one of my go-tos. And also I wanted to mention native pollinator plants for Southern Oregon that I wrote with Tom Landis, that's available for purchase as a hard copy through my website or at the PPRV office in Phoenix. Or you can download the PDF for free on my website as well. Then here's the Klamath Siskiyou Native Seeds website again, just klamathsiskiyouseeds.com. And I want to mention some upcoming events, like Christina said. So I am going to be doing a Grow Native Plants from Seed presentation for the Jackson County Master Gardeners at OSU Extension on June 1st, 5:30 to 7:30. And then I'll be doing, as Christina mentioned, I'll be doing 2 different workshops at a property on Mount Ashland Ski Road. And so it'll be native seeding project and seed collection workshops. It'll be hosted by Pollinator Project Rogue Valley. So the first workshop will be July 1st, and the second workshop will be September 10th, and we will have more details to come. And then celebrating the Siskiyou Crest Festival of Arts, Culture, and Science will be at Pacifica Garden in Williams, July 14th through the 16th. And I wanted to mention that because many of you may be interested. July 14th is the Friday of the festival, and that is featuring botany and ecology hikes and field trips all around the region. There's 9 or 10 different field trips offered on July 14th. So check out the festival page to sign up for one of the field trips. You can learn more. There's a couple great butterfly trips. One in particular at Bigelow Lakes is going to be just looking at the butterflies at Bigelow Lakes. So you might even see these guys there because this photo was taken at Bigelow Lakes. So you may be interested in checking that out. And I'm also working on organizing a private tour of the Troon Vineyard Native Plant Pollinator Botanical Garden sometime in June. I haven't set a firm date yet, but if you're interested, let me know and I'll put you on the email list for the invitation. So I'll be taking people on a tour of the gardens, discussing the creation of the gardens, talk about specific species in its 3rd year of growth. And then people can drink wine, tour the many other aspects of the vineyard, etc. And with that, I will go ahead and stop sharing, and I will open it up to questions.
I didn't see any questions in the chat or comments, but I will just add, for those of you who haven't been to Troon, it's totally worth a trip out there, whether you drink wine or not, just to see the garden. And if you drink wine, that's an extra bonus. It's a lovely place to go. And it sounds like it's really going now based on last year, and then now even this year, I'm sure it's even more with plants blooming throughout the season. So it's definitely a lovely place to go. And then you have lots of good events coming up. I have a couple questions, but I wanted to see if anyone wanted to drop anything in the chat or have any comment. David Lee Myers said a very good and informative presentation, and David would have a lot to add to this, I'm sure, if we wanted to have a conversation. David, some of you know, gave the first presentation on the larval host plants, which was also very good and informative. I have a question about the sap. So like if I go over to a native tree or a shrub or something, where will I see the sap? How do I know that sap?
Oh, obviously if you wound a tree, if you cut into into the bark, you'll see sap
Mhm.
coming out. And so there's always natural wounds or natural places where sap's flowing out of the tree. From any sort of damage, and just sometimes it's maybe from like woodpecker holes or insect, like it could be from lots of various reasons. Maybe another tree fell on it and damaged it, and now there's sap flowing. Sometimes it's from disease. Sometimes can make trees, sap flow from trees, and there's various reasons. But I mean, trees generally have sap flowing out of them from somewhere.
Okay, I haven't looked closely enough.
Yeah. And tree sap's its own really fascinating thing. There's lots of different colors of sap. Sap trees their sap, the nutrient level can change, depending on, the soil conditions or the weather conditions or post-fire. There's lots of different factors that can impact the nutrition of tree sap, and I'm sure butterflies are really tuned into that in a way that we have very little personal knowledge of.
That's awesome. And then a number of the plants, not all of them, unfortunately, but a number of the plants that you talked about are growing in our garden in Phoenix. So people can come, like our horsemint is blooming. Well, we actually just planted it this year. So it's blooming this first summer, and it's just a beautiful plant. So some of them that you've talked about can be seen there in Phoenix. So so for some reason, Pete's just entering the room. So yeah, I think this has been great. No one has any questions or comments? Lynn, nothing? Yes, Aaron has something.
If I can just ask it rather than type it in the chat. Do you have this list, your plant list, Suzie, available that other than your
like a specific butterfly food plant list? Not necessarily, but I could easily put it together if that would be of interest to people. If we wanted to, I could create that when we send out the and put it with the link to the recording when we put that out. So that's a good idea. Honestly, my list could go on and on and on, but you have to limit it somewhere, and some of it's just depending on, how common something is or how abundantly you see butterflies using that particular species. But there's so much more to learn about this topic even. But yeah, I could put something together that's simple and kind of based on this presentation that would do the job. That would be a good introductory list. And I will just back up what Christina said about Troon. If you want to visit the gardens and you haven't been there before, you don't have to buy anything. It's open to the public. That's one of the reasons I really wanted to do the project there, is that you don't have, like, it's not a public space per se, it's private land, but they treat it as public, so anybody could go there. You don't have to buy wine. So you don't have to be a wine drinker. I'm not a wine drinker too much. I will partake here and there, but you definitely don't have to drink wine. You can just go and enjoy the gardens.
On the other hand, if you are a wine drinker, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming today, and go out and enjoy the blooms and the butterflies, and keep documenting what you see and taking photos and all that. So
that's great. Thank you, Suzie. This has really been wonderful. Just so appreciate your knowledge, sharing all of this, not to mention the plants. And we will see you again soon, I'm sure. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you for supporting PPRV.
Thank you so much. Very interesting.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.